When I see everyone on booktok reading a book, I just feel super left out. That's why in this video, I'm going to be reading a famous booktok novel. Booktok is so polarizing. To some people, it is the ultimate place to get book recommendations, and I must admit for myself, there are so many times when I see everyone on booktok reading a book, I just feel super left out. But after having picked up a couple of booktok recommendations, they're not always as good as you might think. That's why in this video, I'm going to be reading a famous booktok novel, and I'm going to be talking about the ones that I've read and whether or not they're hits or misses. If you're new here, I'm Tapiwa. I make bookish content on my YouTube channel. I say that I mostly read literary fiction, and I want to read the most popular books in this genre because everybody just says they're good and you want to be part of that hype. I personally love character-driven stories. I feel like it allows me to open that lens for my own self and to reflect and to grow as a person when I read stories about other characters and the challenges and the difficulties and the realizations that they have. And in this video, I'm going to be reading a popular booktok literary fiction novel. The book that I'm reading is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I've heard a lot about this book on booktok, ranging from good to the bad. This book is so infamous at this point where I feel like I almost know the entire premise of the story, but either way, I still want to experience what everyone else has been talking about when it comes to this novel. So I'm just going to read the blurb so we can all get a little bit of a sense of what we'll be getting into. Athena Liu is a literary darling, and June Hayward is literally nobody. White lies. When Athena dies in a freak accident, June steals her unpublished manuscript and publishes it as her own under the ambiguous name Juniper Song. Dark humor. But as evidence threatens June's stolen success, she discovers exactly how far she will go to keep what she thinks she deserves. Deadly consequences. What happens next is entirely everyone else's fault. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of that like hating the protagonist vibe already. A little bit of like deflection there in that last line, like it's not her fault. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. I read another R.F. Kuang book, Babel, and it was amazing. I think I really just liked how she didn't shy away from politics at all. She was like very on the nose when it came to politics, and I hope I get more of that. And I must say, I don't usually read stories about characters that we explicitly maybe are not supposed to hate but end up hating, so this is going to be a first for me. And I also think that it's kind of good timing because it's August right now, and R.F. Kuang's newest book, Catabasis, comes out this month, and I can't get my hands on that, so I think this will have to be a close second for now. So yeah, let's get started with the reading. Moments where secrets were revealed to us that were held inside the community, so create anticipation, tension, suspense. To read, she would mention the same thing over and over and over again without ever like get text to the situation. So it's just like you're being reminded of yourself, which is just incredibly frustrating. Like for an example, Caddy, and multiple times in probably every chapter up until the point when it was revealed, which was halfway through the book, Caddy would be mentioning that she had a sin, and we just didn't know what we didn't know. And I think she was doing that to try to build anticipation, but it just was more frustrating. And in some ways I can say that I feel like I connected to Caddy. It's fun growing up in any sort of situation where you're unsure about your place and whether or not you're loved. As a child, that really struck me as something that was painful, and I could relate, which is completely different because I feel like in a religious context, it's of your sins and of it. But from my own personal point of view, like, trauma is something that even has the possibility to show up in other areas of life and can follow you for a very, very long time. We're also witnessing how she's dealing with her success that she feels like she is entitled to. So we're just watching her character expand into this monstrous thing, and I'm curious to see where she will end up, because I feel like her critics are going to continue and maybe find something out. Is she going to crack under the pressure because she is not authentic at all? Those are my 100-page thoughts. I genuinely hope that it gets a bit more interesting for me. I really want to like this book, so we're going to continue on with this and let's see how it shapes up. I'm now at the 65% mark with this book, and so far I've actually started enjoying it a lot more than I was before. But I do have this one tiny little thought on it, and it's kind of the idea of who is the right person to tell stories. Just because you are not from a certain culture, are you then not allowed to research and tell stories about cultures that you're not from, even if you've done the work? I mean, not taking into consideration the character in the book and her motivations and her actions, but just in general, in terms of like the ability to appreciate other cultures from a respectful lens. And that's the question that this book brings up, and I feel like, in my own opinion, if you are respectful and if you are truthful and not biased in negative ways, that's just a question that I've had around this book. This book has brought up for me, and I think that as long as you're respectful, you should be able to tell stories about other cultures. Like, I like history and I like learning about other cultures, but I also understand the critique of if you are not someone from that culture and you go out of your way, intentional or not, to butcher that culture or represent it in a dishonest way, it can materially harm the lives of the people in that culture. So I understand there's definitely two sides to it. As someone who's not part of the culture, you hold the power of perception without actually having any of the consequences of your words held against you. Honestly, I think that this book, in the beginning, it was not hooking me as much, but as we're going on, I'm starting to really enjoy it a lot more. It's just becoming even more complicated and nuanced, and I'm really enjoying that. Like, there is no clear winner, and there are no good guys and bad guys. There's just a whole bunch of grey in between. So that's the material that we are working with. But obviously there are still bad guys in this case. Reading this book, I just find it is so interesting to see how pernicious biases and racism can be. Like, for our female main character, it's showing up in so many tiny and still important ways. Things like food, deceptions, movies, silencing people, like her biases against people and cultures is just in almost everything that she does, and it's insane. So far, I feel like I'm enjoying this book. Once I've let it sit more in my brain, I really start to believe. I start to say, yeah, this is actually good, and it is good. So I'm enjoying it. So we're gonna keep on reading this guy. So it is a couple days later and I have finished reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I'm going to talk about this book, but I'm also going to talk about a couple of booktok popular books, and I'm going to let you guys know what I thought of them and whether they're worth the hype. Yellowface is a book that I would recommend. It is set in modern day Washington, D.C., and it tells the story of two Ivy League educated authors. The story is told through the eyes of June Hayward, and she's a failed author who ends up committing a series of unsavory acts to bolster her career. What starts out as a friendship between the two women in university ends up becoming something more fraught and complicated, and it ends up building so much resentment in June that she is able to betray her friend in the most heinous way possible. And as June gets wrapped up in the lies that she has created, so too does the audience which she has illegitimately cultivated. They start to dwindle. And I hate to be that person, but I actually did read this book because of the TikTok hype, but also because Catabasis comes out this month, and I guess I just wanted to be more informed with all things having to do with R.F. Kuang. And I really enjoyed this book because if you've never gotten into the publishing world, this book offers a really good introduction into all of the major people involved when getting a book published, including the marketers, editors, the agents, etc., which I honestly believe is the easiest way to learn about the publishing industry is through a book, because it has you thinking about all of the intricacies while you read the story. And there were definitely some moments where I felt like I couldn't put this book down, because even though the plot of the story is well known, R.F. Kuang has infused so much audacity into June's character, which makes it extremely bingeable. She writes June's story as a steady demise, which is completely believable and in some ways not harsh enough for the amount of racism she consistently spewed out. This book showed how readily society will keep people who only harm and appropriate. And I think the conversation on stories and who has the right to tell stories really stuck with me. And there is a serious conversation which can be continued outside of the book about what good faith cultural exploration looks like. And I think genuinely R.F. Kuang handles political issues in such a great way, and she honestly had me questioning the microaggressions and internalized racism I had within myself, which is why I very, very much recommend you to read this book. Moving on to A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. As you can see, I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but I do recommend this book with an asterisk. This book can be very triggering emotionally, so if you're not in a good emotional space, I would be very wary of that. But honestly, I think that this book just resonated for me, and in all that happened in this book, the happy years are what stands out for me the most. The next book I'm going to be talking about is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jaqueline Harpman, and I read this book back in March. It is a speculative fiction novel. It is exploring an alternate world where a huge event has happened, and this event has left women and people who have lived seemingly normal lives locked up in a bunker. And there is that bit of an apocalyptic survival aspect to this book, and it's very much speculative in the fact that you don't get get all the answers about the reality that the women find themselves in. I was drawn to this book because of the title, and I'd heard so many good things about this book going into it, so I had pretty high expectations for this book. I was expecting feminist discourse, but it's a lot more quiet, reflective, and speaking more on the human experience. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Actually, all of those things are great. And they're things that I love about this book specifically. But I feel like once I got used to the pace and the tone of the book, I was expecting a bit more development in the plot and the story, and there was a huge difference between what I expected the book to be and what it actually was. And in some instances the book felt quite repetitive. I did enjoy seeing the characters and how they reacted to their new reality and how they formed community. I did end up giving this book 3 stars. There were definitely moments that I enjoyed in the book, and I think I would partially recommend this book, especially if you're someone who enjoys speculative fiction, who doesn't really need all the answers or that much of an engaging plot. Then maybe you would enjoy this book. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book was amazing. It is a long book, but I feel like this book could go on for longer and I would not be mad. I found the characters so interesting and unique, and even though you start out the book knowing so much of what will happen, you still are taken on the journey of discovering the confounding events which lead to that outcome, which is incredibly satisfying. I almost feel like every clue led me in a different direction, and I just love Tartt's writing. It's incredibly believable. I genuinely feel like there's nothing in this book that I would change. I gave this book 5 stars, and I 100% recommend this book to anyone who enjoys amazing writing and just well-crafted stories that pull you in from the first sentence. And the next book that I'm going to be talking about is The Will of the Many. I have many thoughts, so let's get started on this book. For me, this is a great concept, but I feel like I don't fully understand what I think I should. I know, like, this is so great. It's such a great concept, but I'm a bit devastated because I really do like it, but I feel like so much of the world is so unexplained still. This book blends about 3 genres, I'd say. It is fantasy, dystopian, and there's a tiny bit of dark academia going on as well. And I feel like it genuinely does justice to all 3 of those subgenres. And I do think we get through so much of the plot without having enough grounding on the concepts that make up the magic system and the system that the world is built upon, how that all works. In this book, I think I'd say the dark academia aspect is the least prominent, especially because in the academy we're studying facts and information about concepts and theories that as a reader I still fully didn't understand, so it was just like rambling and I didn't get it. So I feel like that part was a bit unfair. The dystopian nature of this book, even though it is quite cool, it follows the basic markers of most dystopian stories with like hierarchies of power in this society. So it's one of those books which I enjoy a lot, and I feel like the mechanisms of the power have been thought out in a really unique and interesting way, and I think it makes sense why our protagonist is in the current predicament that he is, and it genuinely makes the stakes feel a lot more real. Our main character, Viz, is caught in the crosshairs of politics in the society in many different ways, and he doesn't have like limitations, be that mental or physical, that he doesn't seem to overcome. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't face any adversity. He definitely has had some struggles and hardships and things that have held him back in so many ways, but he just naturally seems able to overcome the ones that matter. The one thing that I feel like I took away from this book is the word imbue, which, if you know, is like a part of the magic system something that they can do with their magic. I'm not gonna spoil. But if you ask me to describe the actual mechanism of imbuing, I'm not sure I would be able to fully explain how that works. And I feel like the fantasy element is definitely influenced by the magic system and the world building that we get in this book. And I feel like all of the unique combination of ancient Rome and the magic system and the plot, that twist that gets revealed towards the end of the book, makes me feel like there's nothing that has been done like this in a book ever. I definitely can't verify that, but it genuinely feels like a unique concept. The writing in this book is very understandable, and in some moments it genuinely reads like a screenplay. I think that this would be a really good movie to one day make. And the second book of this series comes out this year, so I'm happy I don't have to wait too long. To me, the premise and emotion of this book is brilliant, and it's a solid 4-star read, and I 100% recommend this. Those are the most booktok-ish books that I've read. I feel like my reading isn't fully aligned with booktok, so I don't have more books that I can talk about. So if you have any booktok recommendations which you think are good, leave them down below in the comments. And a part 2 might be in our near future. And just as a reminder, these are just my opinions, and that's just what I thought about a couple of popular books. Hopefully this gave you some book ideas, and you now have some books in mind that you would like to read. That's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and also subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.